We're rolling. Welcome to the REI Rookies Podcast, the Real Estate Investing Rookies Podcast, where we allow you to follow us on our journey towards financial freedom using the power of real estate. I'm Josh Koth, and Jack Haas had all the heavy lifting on this episode. I was gone, and he interviewed Damion Lupo, who I can best describe as a financial freedom educator. Make sure you check him out on DamionLupo.com and check out the awesome interview to follow. I haven't listened to it yet, so let's listen together. Go for it, guys.
Well, we're going to welcome Damion Lupo to the Real Estate Investing Rookies Podcast, but based on his bio, I wouldn't consider him much of a rookie. I really appreciate you joining us here today, Damion. But to give everybody a little background, why don't we start there? I got a lot of stats based on some information I've collected, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from you. So why don't you give the listeners a little background?
All right. Happy to, Jack. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. I was a rookie like everybody else. And back in 99, I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I went out and I bought a house on my credit card. I thought, this is how you do it, because, I didn't know any better. And a month later, I went and saw Robert Kiyosaki in Orlando, and I bought every tape at this real estate seminar. And I just started doing everything these people said to do, because the great thing about being 22 is you're totally naive and you think you can build the Great Wall of China in a day. So I went and did that, and over 5 years, listened to what the seminars and the mentors and the gurus said. And I ended up buying 150 houses, started developing all over the country. And I made many, many millions of dollars, had like a $20 million portfolio. So it's obviously very impressive when you hear that number. And it's also equally impressive or scary when you realize that you can take 20 million and turn it into negative 5 million in a period of 18 months, which is what I did in 2008.
Yeah, there was a lot of shakeup in 2008, wasn't there? So how did you find, that's one of those things that I think is really interesting, is that a lot of the investors that went through 2008 that I know still persevered. They still understood that real estate was the way forward, and they got back into it. It's kind of a recurring story there. How did you decide that, I know 2008 happened, but I'm going to get back into this?
Well, 2008 happened, and then my core, like everything in me, said, stay away from real estate. It's a hot stove and it burned you, so don't go near it. And that's what happens when you get hurt by something. You tend to be pretty gun shy about it for a while. So it took a few years for me to even think about the idea of doing real estate or being involved. And what's fascinating is a lot of people that I run into now that are teaching really have no cycle experience, which is very dangerous when people have, they've been involved in real estate for the last 5 or 6 years. And I say, great, what's your experience? And they say, it's all good. And I go, yeah, well, you're in a rising tide. Right. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means you don't have the experience of being in a cyclical market, or you don't have that. That's what gets people in trouble. I didn't understand that markets would cycle. Academically, I did, but emotionally, I did not. So when I was out there and I had millions of dollars in cash, I said, this is amazing. I'm so smart. I just had really good timing. Mm-hmm. And so I went back in and started doing things based on my ego. And ultimately the universe said, we're going to slap you around. So the shift that happened was me saying, okay, real estate is smart if I'm going to be smart. But real estate doesn't mean it. Real estate's stupid if you're going to be egotistical. It'll eat your lunch. Mm-hmm. So that's what you've got to be aware of as a rookie or a novice. You've got to be aware that it still requires due diligence. And if something looks all exciting, and you don't feel like you need to really dig into it, you're going to have a experience, and it's probably going to be very painful.
Yeah, one of the statistics that you put up here, and I noticed that when you said Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and you bought all the things, you spent over $1 million in your real estate education and mentors and seminars and the like. And Josh and I are in a similar path. I wouldn't say we're at $1 million threshold, but we definitely find the education as much of it as I'm trying to find the words now, as much of a investment as anything else. I mean, it's as far as we're concerned, it's like buying another rental.
Well, here's the thing about going out and spending money on education. You're going to spend money on the education of mistakes, regardless of whether you have mentors and seminars and everything else. The question is, does it bleed you to death? And if you make mistakes, like my very first book I wrote, which is, if you want to see the worst design on a book ever, it's called Maverick Mistakes in Real Estate Investing. It's what it looks like when a real estate investor uses PowerPoint to design a book cover. It's actually super funny. And I don't change it because it's embarrassing and it's a funny story. But it was the first $1 million that I lost in real estate, and it's chapter by chapter, those checks I wrote. So every time that you look at a seminar or something, or mastermind, and it's 5,000 or 20,000, and you go, ooh, that's a lot of money. Well, you know what? Every chapter in that book is like $20,000. And I guarantee you, if you're in a decent mastermind, you can avoid about 95% of those chapters. So the question is, do you want to write the checks in the experience every time, or do you want to have some people around you that can help guide you through this path? And so the $1 million made me 20 million. And the problem is I didn't spend $1.2 million. The other 200,000 would have kept me in front of people that would have said, whoa, chill out, dude. Like, this is part of the top of a cycle. And I didn't have that because my ego took over. I'm mentioning ego a lot because the ego will kill you on deals that are good or deals that are bad. It'll kill you because it's not rational. There's no logic anymore. It's just your glands doing all the work.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring that up, because we are always on a struggle where we don't want to miss out on a deal. But we come from an IT background, to give you kind of a nutshell here. So we're very analytical when it comes to certain things. So we have a certain threshold. We have our numbers that we go in, and we really basically try not to let emotions run wild. But when you get into that auction state, sometimes that kind of gets thrown out the window.
Yeah, it's called FOMO. The fear of missing out will drive you crazy and make you do irrational things where you'll look back and say, what crazy person possessed my body to be in that space of bidding things up? And it's also the X factor, Jack, where you're smart, you got number savvy in your brain, and you're like, I'm a math geek. So I can look at math and I can say, yeah, that makes sense. And then there's that X factor that shows up. And it's like, wait, what happened? Bear Stearns just went and collapsed? Like, whoa. Like, and now in the market that we're in now, we don't know what X factor it's going to be. We just know there's a lot of snow on the side of this mountain, and it's very avalanche prone. And so if you're not aware of that, it doesn't matter which snowflake knocks this thing down. It's Jim Rickards talks about this a lot with, and that's actually his analogy. It's really great. We don't know which snowflake it's going to be. And quite frankly, it doesn't make any difference. The reality, though, is that when you've got irrational exuberance, like our friend Alan Greenspan used to say, if you've got that going on in a market, then eventually it's going to shake the market and it's going to change things. So you've got to make sure that your deal can survive through a recession. And a lot of deals right now can't survive a recession. What they're doing is they're hoping. So they've got everybody's smoking a bunch of hopium,
right?
And that's their strategy. Like, that is the stupidest thing.
Smoking a bunch of opium. I love that. So, well, with all of these different options that people have available to them right now, where do they start? Like,
the best place to start is to basically attach yourself to people that are already in the middle of things, that are doing it, not somebody that's been doing it for 12 months. That's basically somebody that, who cares? They don't have any real experience. Right. It's like somebody that's in their postdoc and they've had 6 days of experience after 12 years of education. Like, who cares? They don't really have anything to bring to the table. You can read the same books. You need the emotional and spiritual understanding of being out there for a while. So go attach yourself to, I say guys like us, Jack, that are bald. Go find guys like us, or, I don't say gals like us because there's not a lot of bald women, but people that have been out there, and maybe there's some gray, that find people that have actually been there, done that, and then spend time around them and mimic them and model. And that's going to be a really powerful way to start, because there's too many options. Even if you're smart, where do you start? There's 1,000 different places to go. And hey, you know what? Here's a secret. Don't worry about starting in the wrong one. Just start somewhere and go do it. You may go, 6 months in, I hate this thing. I don't like mini storage or apartments or dirt or like whatever. Great. Go do something else. But you're not going to learn that until you actually go do something.
That's one of the things that I thought, and Josh and I have talked about this quite a bit. It wasn't until we invested in our education, and instead of trying to outthink the process, we actually got to work and emulate what other people have done before us. That's when things started to roll and started to click. It's interesting you bring that up and reiterate that.
Well, there's this thing, and I'll tell you what the problem is, that basically we're all running with a program from our childhood that said, if you get 50% wrong, you're a failure. I mean, 50% on anything in school is failing, and you get ostracized, you get thrown out, and you're basically told you're an idiot, and they kick you out, and your parents say, "Oh, you're an idiot." Well, here's the deal: if you get 50% right in the real world, you're a billionaire. Yeah. And we've got this programming and this emotional scar tissue of don't make a mistake. It's the exact wrong thing to be successful. It's the opposite. So going out there and starting with something where you're actually putting money on the line, and that can mean going and investing in a mastermind group or something, but getting money out there. I don't care how many books you read. If you don't have real money, and I'm not talking about $10 for a book. I mean, that's nice, but if you're not actually putting up money, you won't learn. Last year, I put a pretty significant amount of money in Bitcoin and these different cryptocurrencies. I believe that our monetary system is changing after 4471, and now in 2018, it's shifting. I don't know if I'm going to be right. In fact, my portfolio is down 75%, but I put the money in there because I know I'll pay attention. And since then, I've read like 25 books on it, and I've been around a lot of people talking about it. So I know if I put money in something, I'll pay attention. It's the same thing for you guys. You got to put money, skin in the game, to get you to really pay attention. You can tell me, some people will say, well, no, I'm going to pay attention, I'll learn. Not at an emotional level, because we're emotional about money. And that's what will really drive you to pay attention and grow so that you can become an attack dog and actually make progress.
Yeah, you can actually see what you're talking about on any of the free trainings that happen in our area. You know, you can always attend a book study. You can always do this and that. And let's say it's a 4-week, even a simple 4-week book study. Yeah. By that end of that 4th week, you're just a fraction of the people. There's no skin in the game. There's no reason for those people to show up. And yeah, there's going to be 1 or 2 here and there that kind of cling on and see the value in the content. But like you said, having that skin in the game is a big thing.
Well, it's it's a funny thing. People will reach out to me, and I love talking to people. They reach out on LinkedIn, or they have a question, and I'm always happy to help. But when somebody says, I want a mentor, and I know there's a lot of people that will say, great, rich people like to be mentors. And this is true. But the reason that I charge $40,000, $50,000 a year for somebody to be mentored by me is not because I need that money. I mean, I have plenty of money and I have plenty of businesses that are working. What I need is them to pay attention. And I don't want to waste my time. So the reason that they have to pay is so that they'll pay attention. And people go, well, that's crazy. Are you worth it? I don't know, maybe. But I do know that I value my time and I'm not going to waste it. So I have to have pain money involved for somebody so that they'll pay attention. And that's why you're right with these free courses. You end up with crickets at the end. And do people follow up? Do they do their homework? If I give somebody a suggestion and I'm mentoring them, they damn well better do it. Well, if you're paying me $50,000 and you don't do it, then you're a moron, because I'm only telling you to do that because it's for you. It's not for me. So there's going to be a threshold that you've got to cross to work with high caliber people. Tony Robbins charges $1 million a year. You damn well better believe that people are going to commit and do what he suggests, and what he opens space for, they're going to run through it. So there's a reason that things that cost money can be valuable. Doesn't mean everything that costs money is valuable, but for the best coaches, the mentors, and the people, you're going to pay a premium, and it's going to launch you.
Yeah, we're definitely finding that out. I mean, it's well worth the investment. We talk about it quite a bit, where we like to try to find those deals. We call them infinite return type deals, where you can try to get that return on investment where we have as little as possible of our own cash in it. If that's the deal, our education has hit that mark more times than not. So, I mean, it's well worth that type of investment.
That's a great point to bring up, because if you think about the becoming educated and being around people that are thinking differently, you can read techniques on apartments or techniques on real estate. One of the big differences in the values of being around people that have the thinking that you have about the infinite returns is that it'll break you out of this, okay, I need to go find an 8 or 10% return on my money. Infinite is real, and it happens all over the place. It's basically using the investment and the asset of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
But if your belief systems are blocking it, if you think that that's impossible, it's because it's impossible for you. I mean, I've done hundreds of deals without any of my money where I basically printed cash and made it up. And it's because I created value between my ears. But we're used to this industrial age idea and strategy that you trade time for money and that you get a return based on Wall Street's BS, this 8% type of thing. That's all nonsense. It's all manufactured to keep us trapped in a system that doesn't serve us. It serves these masters that we've decided are in charge of us, and they're smarter because they call us stupid and they say, you're not worthy. Well, that's wrong. We have to choose something different, though.
So, I can talk mindset all day long. In fact, I might have to have you back on just to do that, like for a half an hour. But I wanted to cover a couple other things because there's been one of the things that I understand that you have some opinions on is around hard money and the expense of it. We've only dealt with hard money a couple times here now, and those points sometimes are kind of shocking, plus a few other aspects of hard money lenders. But do you have some tactics or some suggestions on how to deal with hard money?
Well, one of the first things that I would say, one of the primary things, is that if you're looking at a deal, if you're working with hard money, and so I'm talking about the investor side, and you get all wound up about paying 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 points and 12 or 14%, if that bothers you, it means your deal sucks. I had a guy that had done a lot of deals with me. I loaned him a lot of money, and he came in. He goes, "Is this going to cost points again? I mean, can I get my rate lower?" And I said, "Let me tell you something, brother. I'm giving you money inside of 24 hours because you asked me for it. If you think that you would rather not pay points, go find somebody else that's going to give you access to that kind of liquidity and decide which one's more valuable." Liquidity and access to funds is priceless. And it's like people that say, "Well, my deal is great." And I go, "What? Tell me about it." And they say, "Well, I'm hammering the nails and I'm collecting the rent." I go, "Your deal sucks because your deal can't afford professionals." It's the same thing with the hard money. Points, that's awesome. Pay the points. Make sure your deal can afford it. And if you've got that in place, it means that you can do a lot of deals and get a lot of stuff done. So if you're cringing at points, you're probably doing bad deals.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That everything is mindset, right? And up until now, I guess I hadn't. We're so used to doing it a certain way that we tried the hard money lender so we could report about it on the podcast, actually. Mm-hmm. And now that you put it in that light, I think it does change my point of view on that quite a bit.
Well, the other thing too is that I work a lot with people in their retirement money, and so they're generally stuck inside their IRAs and their 401ks, and I give them a tool so they can use their retirement money for all their real estate stuff and not pay this sneaky little UBIT tax, which is what happens when you use debt like hard money. And people go, "Well, I don't know if I want to do that because hard money is expensive and I want to go get a Fannie or Freddie or like a 4% loan." And I go, again, your deal sucks. Think about what would happen if you can do a deal with a Roth retirement account and use hard money. You can do unlimited amounts of deals. You can have $20,000 or $30,000 in your retirement account, use hard money and make a fortune, infinite returns basically, if you change your mindset. And it comes back to the same thing. It's mindset and using some tools and some mindset and just really changing your entire approach. But people, you have to spend time basically knocking yourself around because it's not normal. We're not told these things in mainstream media or by most of the people that are around us. You have to really reinvent yourself.
Yeah, that's really important. And there's a lot of truth to the concept of you are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with. I'm really have become a strong believer in that. And if you would have asked me even just a few years ago, I would have thought a lot of that mindset stuff was a bunch of mumbo jumbo, But
it is. It's crazy. It's just, don't listen to it. Just keep doing what you do and your life will be exactly the same 5 years from now.
Well, that's exactly it, right? When you actually start to surround yourself with those like-minded individuals. I'm constantly, I'm part of a number of networking groups. I'm a part of, I drive my family crazy because I'm always got a podcast playing or an audiobook playing in my pocket, walking around the house. It really does have an impact on on your day-to-day operations.
Well, it's a great point. And I remember back in the beginning when I was starting out, I was by myself. I was having, people were basically, my parents, my family was saying, why aren't you going back to college? It was like the second or third time I dropped out, and I was doing real estate, and I wasn't making any money in the beginning, and everybody thought I was crazy. So what did? I did what you're talking about. I just put these guys in my ears. I put Jim Rohn and Anthony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and Ron LeGrand and all these guys. I put them in my ears, and I would just absorb them. And it's funny, you start talking like people if you listen to them enough. Like you listen to Tony Robbins for 1,000 hours and you start saying things like Tony, you're like, whoa, where did that come from? But it's because you absorb it. And guess what? You're absorbing the stuff from people around you now. It's really a question of, do you want to keep being them, or do you want to evolve into something that's maybe even better, that's going to give you more freedom? And that's probably why you're listening to this, because it's not exactly the way you want it in your current life with the current influences and influencers. So just piling on those pieces, I call it the Bucky 5 in my book, In Reinvented Life. Those 5 people, you really do become the average of them in every way. It's your health, it's your abundance thinking, it's the money. Like if you average the income of the 5 people around you, you are basically the average of those 5 people. It's terrifying if you're like, wow, no, they only make 60,000 or whatever. You know what? You're probably not that far off. I mean, that's just kind of the reality of it in most cases.
Yeah, that's really a good point. And that since you brought it up, let's talk about that book.
Reinvented Life.
Reinvented Life. And you mentioned before we got on here that it is, people are describing it as a Breaking Bad, or there's a pretty big story around this.
Yeah, here's the thing. When going through the process of losing $20 million, this process I went through, even after that happened, I just basically pretended it didn't happen. It took me a couple of years to have what I call the trigger event. And the trigger event for me was when I was camped out. I was just basically trying to pretend nothing had happened. And I had 4 armed federal agents show up at my door. So I look through my peephole, and there's these 4 people with sidearms and badges. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're here. I didn't know who they were, but they were there. And so I just did what anybody would do. I hid in the closet for 2 hours. And when I came out, I found an envelope at the door, and it was from the IRS. And I opened it up and I went, oh man, this is not good. But then it's interesting because it was addressed to the lady that lived in the house before me. Yeah. It wasn't even for me. So, but here's the thing. It was actually for me. The message was for me because it brought me to my knees, and I realized how much fear I was in. And for most of us, there's a piece of fear that's keeping us trapped. And I needed something to knock me around, and that knocked me to the ground. It really took me down to a place where I could look in the mirror and say, well, this is not who I want to be. And then I had to figure out what to do about it. So the next process was another 2 years. And the next 2 years was me working with a guy and asking one question every week for 2 years. And that question is, what is true? It's the single most powerful question that you can ask yourself that will bring you conscious in 15 seconds. And then you keep asking it over and over again to go deeper so that you can get past this whole fear state. Because in all likelihood, we're afraid of something that's keeping us stuck in some part of our life. And you've got to drill past the surface to figure out what that is so you can untangle it and rewire yourself and then have a life by design versus by default.
Well, most people will run away from fear or run away from pain versus running towards pleasure. I mean,
totally
see that time and time again. Mm-hmm. I catch myself still doing that. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
It's a primal instinct. I mean, we have our amygdala in place for a reason. It's so that we don't get eaten. What's fascinating, so I just got back from Africa recently, and I'm out there with the elephants and the Cape buffalo and everything, and I grew up in Alaska. So these are 2 places where you literally need to have your amygdala protecting you from things that will eat you. Like they will eat you, right? In your front yard in Alaska, a bear, which I had, could potentially eat you. And in Africa, if you make a mistake, like the lady that was there before me who tried to get some lion cubs all lined up for her photograph, and mama came out and ate her, killed her. I mean, that happens, but that's because she was exceptionally stupid. The truth is, nothing else out there is going to eat you. But our brain is programmed, and this thing, this old knob in there, is still saying, that thing will eat you. If you make a mistake, it'll eat you. Let me tell you, nothing's going to eat you. Just stay away from Africa and Alaska. You'll be fine. You'll just learn a lot. And, because there's winners and learners, but everybody thinks, oh, it's a winner or I'm going to be eaten alive. Like if I make a mistake, that is not true. So just tell yourself that and practice going through a process of stubbing your toes and realizing it didn't kill you, it's actually very powerful for your evolution.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been doing lately is that when I do experience any kind of anxiety or fear, I actually start to ask myself, well, what's the worst case scenario? And when I face it, it's not as scary.
That's awesome. I do a similar thing with asking the question, and then I'll say, okay, what happens then? So if I'm concerned about something, what if I make a mistake on this? What's the worst thing that happens? I lose $5,000, and then what? And then what? And you keep going down. And the worst case scenario literally, okay, I invest everything I have in this one thing, and then what happens? And I lose it. And then what happens? Okay, I have to go find a job. And then what happens? I get an apartment because I got kicked out of my place. And you go to the very end, you're like, oh, I just boomeranged and bounced off an experience. So what happened? Did anything eat me? No. But if it's a great strategy. I love that you brought that up, because it really helps us to get a clarity around things instead of being afraid of the unknown.
So I'm going to ask some pretty selfish questions right now, because Josh and I are looking to go to the next step on a couple things. One of them is we are thinking about adding an administrative assistant or some help here. Who do you think in our situation, who do you start with? Do you start with an administrative assistant, or are we missing somebody?
Well, here's the question. If you don't have an administrative assistant, who is doing the admin?
It's everybody.
Yeah.
You're trying to deal with it.
And probably you as the entrepreneur, as the investor, would be part of everybody, which means you're wasting your time. Right. And so the things that an executive administrative assistant, this person that's doing the admin stuff is going to be able to do things for $20, $25, $30 an hour, whatever. Do you make more than $30 an hour investing?
I would hope so.
Well, me too. And if you're not, get out of the business. Right, you should be making 10 to 100 times that per hour. So the only question is, how quickly can you find the right person? And a little tip, and if you want to find the best people, there's a thing called the Culture Index. It's the most powerful tool, and I've used every one of them, whether it's SDI or DISC or Kobe or all these things. Culture Index is a mathematical way to sift and sort the people that you need based on how they operate. Mm-hmm. And it's not something you have to figure out. It literally, it's a math filter. That's how you find it. People I've still wound up about hiring the wrong people, because when you hire the wrong person, you go, man, I just should have done this myself. Why did I hire the wrong? Because it's painful. So you've got it. That's one of the things that holds me back from hiring people. Maybe you or other people too. You don't want to hire the wrong person, but the problem is you're just wasting time and staying slow.
Well, that's one of those mindsets that I'm frankly struggling with. I know that the money that I spend in my education, it's an investment, and it's going to get me to my end goal a lot faster. For some reason, I've been having that mental block about spending that money. There's getting somebody on staff and getting somebody in the amount of time to see that ROI in this situation for some reason.
Well, Jack, here's one of the things with hiring people. We tend to say we're going to spend money on a person, and so we try to figure out how we can not spend that much because we feel like, I'm spending all this money. If you twist it, you've probably heard this before. You think about investing in the people, and that's your culture. The mindset is, I'm investing in the best, and investing in things makes you money if you invest in the right thing or the right person. If you spend money on people, you're always going to be thinking of them as an expense, and that's a problem. You need to be thinking about people as assets that are part of your culture, that are part of your team. And instead of saying, mistake I made in real estate years ago, I let my partner, because I didn't want to spend time with it. I said, yeah, you hire somebody. He found somebody for $12 an hour, and we got $12 an hour worth of quality out of this person. And I remember thinking, what's the problem? The problem is us. It wasn't even that person. They were doing a great $12 an hour job. So you're just not going to get anything for that, but we were also looking at it as an expense instead of saying, let's get somebody for $30 or $35 an hour that we can walk away for a week and they'll just crush it while we're gone, instead of us calling in every 5 minutes. Hey, did you do this? Did you do that? Basically babysitting. You don't want to be babysitting. You're not in the child care development program.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So you think that's probably where to start, is some sort of assistant?
Absolutely. There's no doubt, because you've got to get that stuff off your plate. I forget who I just heard this from, but it was a brilliant thing. It was on one of my 16-hour flights recently. And the idea was that everything that you're doing that you're going to do more than once, you train somebody to do that thing, and spend up to 30 times the time it takes you to do it on the training. So if it takes you 5 minutes, okay, that's 150 minutes that you're willing to train somebody on that thing that you're doing every day. 150 minutes. So you think about that, you're like, okay, that's 2.5 hours. And you go, why would I do that? It only takes me 5 minutes. Well, imagine the return on investment. For the 150 minutes, this thing is going to be offloaded. So for the next year, those 5 minutes times 250 days, that's 1,250 minutes that you save by investing 150. So what's the return? I mean, it's epic. 1,000%. 900%, whatever it is. So, but we don't want to do that. We go, it's only 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes every day. And how many 5-minute things, how many 20-minute things do you do? Up to 30 times what you spend the time on. If you will invest that in somebody else and training them and spending time getting them up to speed so you can hand it off, it'll change your life.
Sure. What are your thoughts on virtual assistants?
I think virtual assistants are great. The problem is there was a paper that somebody wrote and they got the Nobel Prize for back like 100 years ago on the nature of a firm. I was listening to Paul Zane Pilsner this morning, and he was talking about this. And there's an idea where you could hand things off to people, but the efficiencies that are lost in that if you have a lot of different people doing a lot of different things, you spend so much time chasing cats that sometimes there is a point where you need to say, okay, I need in-house people that are full-time, totally focused. It's like having a bookkeeper. If you don't have a bookkeeper, you're an amateur. When you do though, there is a point where you need somebody in-house, where you have enough stuff. You need somebody that's only focused on your thing, because a bookkeeper that's focused on 20 different companies, that you basically have to train them every time you're interacting with them. So that's one of the problems. You want somebody that is not thinking about 20 other people's stuff. And it's part of the growing pains. You start off where you have virtual assistants and you can start getting things outsourced. Eventually, you want to have enough stuff going on where you've got that person doing just your stuff. So to me, it's a temporary thing, unless it's highly specialized and you're basically saying, I've got a project and that's it for this year, and then we're done, and I'll see you in 2020. So I think there's a use for them, but I think people have overused them, and because they're so hesitant about bringing people in-house, they go, I don't want the commitment. Well, okay, you know what? There's going to be a pain. It's going to be a pain of shuffling and chasing and herding the cats all the time.
Sure. So, based on that, as a real estate, as a business, then what are some of the things that people should be tracking? Like some of the more important things?
You've got to understand what you're spending money on. You've got to, you mentioned being really the analytical and the engineering piece and that stuff. I'm a numbers geek. So I track everything that's happening. I track how many things I'm putting out there, how many times I'm connecting with people, how many conversations I'm having, obviously how much money's coming in. There's critical drivers that you have to understand. And if you don't understand those, you better go find somebody that can help you get clear on those, and then track those and track them every single day. And then there's going to be the key performance indicators, which is really your outcomes. So it's the inputs and the outputs, and you've got to understand what those are. And then you have to start figuring out what the conversions are between those two things. So, I mean, really it comes down to you. If you're in real estate investing, it's about you looking at deals and it's you talking to people, and everything else is really kind of fluff. Because everything else can be done by somebody else that you have in wherever, the Philippines or whatever. A VA can do almost all these things. Infusionsoft can do almost all these things, but it can't go look at deals and it can't connect with people. Those are your two primary jobs. If you can do those and track them and see that you're doing enough of them, your business is going to explode. You're going to be able to hire all the full-time people you want.
No, and looking at the time here, I don't want to take too much more of your time here, but I really appreciate your time here today. Very insightful, and I appreciate you being at least a brief mentor to me here today, as I had some personal questions I'm trying to work through. Where do people find you? I know you have quite a few books. I'm going to try to link to as many as of them I can through Amazon, but where can people find you?
Best place to find me is DamionLupo.com. You'll see what's going on. I've got a new book coming out this fall called Unicornomics. It's the behind the scenes, how to make $1 billion, how to create $1 billion company, how to invest in $1 billion company, and basically all the landmines that are sitting there, and how to vet these things. And so you can either vet because you're going to invest, or you can figure out what you need to put in place to build. And it applies to real estate investors as much as it applies to the next Snapchat. So I basically put that together after the last 20 years of building over 40 companies and buying into things. And a lot of them didn't work. So the worst thing you can do is listen to somebody that's always been successful because they don't have the scar tissue. I have more scar tissue than most people I know. And it's hard to get to that place, but I wanted to be able to share that. So you'll have an opportunity to get more information at damionlupo.com about that book and then the stuff that's coming out in 2019.
Oh, that's great. And remember, if you have any comments or questions for us, please send us an email at info@reiRookies.com. If you want to follow us, please find us on Twitter and Facebook. But remember, it always helps if you would like and subscribe to the show in iTunes and leave a quick review. It helps others, rookie investors, find the show. And remember, get off the bench and into the game. We'll see you next time.